Cursed secrets on a hidden space station, 7 terrifying entities, one in what's been exposed. The night Elizabeth stumbled into the old space station felt cursed from the start. The air held a stale weight, thick with secrets best left undisturbed. As she walked through the dimly lit corridors, faint shadows flitted across the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes, making her skin crawl. She could feel it, the bizarre energy pulsing in the darkness, whispering through the rusted machinery, brushing against her sanity like skeletal fingers. 7 entities lurked within these walls, hungry for something, she was not sure what, but she felt their insatiable gaze beckoning her deeper. Elizabeth was no stranger to fear. As a single mother, she prioritized her kids' safety above everything else. But this wasn't the suburban Ohio she knew, it was a dark echo of something forgotten. The flickering lights overhead cast sinister shapes on the floor, and every sound a creak, a buzz, the deep hum of machines chased her thoughts like restless spirits. Panic clawed at her throat. She should have turned back, but the rent was due. With her savings running dry, a job was too alluring to resist. As she settled into her cramped security booth, her heart raced. Brady and Sophia had grown accustomed to her night shifts. They thought it was just another simple job, but Elizabeth felt the shadows whispering their secrets, the air thick with watchful dread. Just then, she glanced at the monitors. The feeds flickered wildly, flashing distorted images as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Grotesque figures flickered in and out of sight, too bizarre to comprehend, leaving chills racing down her spine. She felt frozen, rooted in place, her breath hitching as terror seeped into her bones. Suddenly, disembodied voices whispered from the darkness of the corridor. Brady always mentioned hearing calls in the night, and Elizabeth brushed it off as his imagination. But the echoes felt undeniably real, mocking her, taunting her sanity. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let us continue. Elizabeth's stomach churned as she glanced once more at the monitors. Shadows danced closer, their forms solidifying, sinister and malevolent. Her heart raced as she recalled the local rumors, the research team that vanished, the ghost stories told in hushed tones. Were these the lost souls? Had they bled into the very walls she now patrolled? The following night, overwhelmed by the creeping dread, Elizabeth reluctantly invited her kids to witness her harmless job. With every passing minute, her anxious eyes jumped from misplaced shapes in the corridor to her children's innocent laughter, blissfully unaware of the danger closing in. Brady's wide eyes met the shadows, and he whispered, "Mom, do you hear it? They're saying something." Each word made Elizabeth's heart clamp tight in fear. Then it happened. Brady, lured by a gust of cold air, vanished down the dark hallway. Elizabeth's pulse hammered violently in her chest. This wasn't just a job anymore, it felt like a climactic showdown against the unfathomable terrors lurking within. Should she chase him? Or would she drag them both into the grasp of the darkness? She stood paralyzed, knowing that the walls held inexplicable horrors, desperate for the lives intertwined with her own. And as she heard the whispered call echoing louder, Elizabeth faced the chilling truth: the real danger was just beginning. Elizabeth's mind raced, battling the paralyzing fear that threatened to consume her. "Brady!" she screamed into the oppressive darkness. Her voice echoed down the metal corridor, swallowed nearly instantly by the gloom. The chilling silence that followed was deafening. She took a hesitant step forward, every instinct screaming at her to turn back, but the thought of her son trapped in the shadowy void pushed her on. The flickering lights above her cast frantic beams, showing glimpses of the corridor as if it were alive, writhing with anxiety just as she was. "Brady!" Her voice cracked, desperation threading through each syllable. But only the tortured echoes responded, twisting her name into sinister mockery. Elizabeth pressed deeper into the station, praying she'd find him alive and whole. The walls hummed, a vibrating resonance that throbbed in her chest, as if they were aware of her intrusion. The shadows shifted with each step she took, coiling tighter around her. She could almost feel them breathing, hungry for her fear. As the corridor narrowed, the air thickened, and an icy hand of dread gripped her throat. Suddenly, a jarring crash echoed behind her. A chair toppled, sent flying by unseen forces. Elizabeth spun around, facing the exit. The monitors flashed erratically, the screens alive with tormenting images. Faces twisted and eternal screams flickered, their mouths open wide in anguish. She slammed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe. Panic surged through her veins. She couldn't leave Brady. Dragging her trembling legs forward, Elizabeth pressed deeper, arms outstretched in search of her son. "Stay with me, buddy. I'm coming." Her words were mere whispers against the backdrop of disembodied laughter now filling the corridor, cascading off the walls like thrown stones. And then, from the shadows emerged a figure. It looked like Brady, his familiar silhouette hovering in the dimness. Relief surged through her. "Brady!" She called again, rushing towards him. But as she got closer, she felt a jolt of fear. The figure was unnaturally still, unnaturally quiet. "Mom?" A voice echoed back, eerily distorted. It wasn't Brady's. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, and dread pooled in the pit of her stomach. "It wants you," it hissed, the tone slippery and cold. In that moment, the lights flickered violently, then plunged her into darkness. The whispering voices grew louder, converging around her, an urgent cacophony desperate to swallow her whole. She turned, heart pounding, but the familiar sound of Brady's laugh shifted to a cry of terror. "Mom!" That word ripped through the oppressive silence like a knife, and with it, Elizabeth's instincts roared to life. She leaped forward, urging her body to move faster than the shadows encroaching upon her. "Don't leave me!" Brady's voice echoed again, filled with unspeakable fear. The walls pulsated, alive with an insistent rhythm that resonated with every hope and ounce of resolve she had left. She pushed forward, extinguishing the shadows with the bright flame of her fear-induced adrenaline. As she reached the end of that corridor, she found herself standing in a vast chamber. Distant lights blinked like stars in an empty sky, and in the center, a swirling pool of darkness beckoned. She felt their presence, the 7 entities closing in, hungry, impatient, waiting for her. "Let him go!" She screamed into the void, her voice ricocheting off the walls. But as the air thickened, she realized with chilling clarity that the abyss didn't plan to release its prey. The ground beneath her rumbled, sending tremors that made her bones rattle. Everything she tried to fight off was about to unleash. The whispers rose to a crescendo, drowning her in cold despair, and just as she felt herself being pulled towards the center, a blinding flash surged through the chamber. When it dimmed, Elizabeth found herself alone in the darkness, the taunting whispers now abruptly silent. "Brady?" she called, her voice a mere whisper against the void around her. But the response was only a lingering silence. And as she turned to flee, a pair of glowing eyes materialized in the blackness, the longing gaze of something sinister. Elizabeth's heart dropped. What had she awakened? Was it too late to save her son? The darkness shrieked in delight, and Elizabeth braced herself for the impending chaos about to be unleashed. The real horror was far from over. The silence felt like a shackle, each breath heavier than the last. Elizabeth's heart hammered in her chest as the glowing eyes pierced the thick darkness. They were alive, watching, waiting. Somehow, she knew without a doubt that they belonged to one of the very entities that had been haunting her. "Brady!" She shouted again, but there was no answer. The void hissed, a predatory sound that made her skin crawl. The twisted laughter echoed once more, but this time mixed with cries that sounded achingly familiar. A chill ran down her spine, those weren't just random sounds. She could hear fragments, words, phrases brushing against her memories. "Mom, help! Brady!" Panic surged through her, spilling over into her screams. They rebounded off the walls, mocking her. The glowing eyes flared, illuminating a narrow path lined with remnants of what could have been the children lost to the darkness, their chilling grins shadowing her every step. "Get away from me!" Elizabeth shouted, shaking her fists at the entities concealed in the shadows. But her anger felt small versus the magnitude of the dread pressing in on her, suffocating and frigid. A movement caught her eye. A shape darted from behind the swirling pool, then, startlingly, it paused. In an agonizing moment, the shifting silhouette lost coherence, transforming into the form of her son. "Mom! Brady!" she yelled, feeling her legs nearly collapse under her. But just as she bolted forward, the lights flickered again, plunging her into an engulfing darkness. The hunger of the entities vibrated through her very soul. "No!" she gasped, her breath hitching. Suddenly, the lights flared to life, and Elizabeth caught sight of a scene that twisted her gut. Countless faces had emerged from the abyss, some seemed familiar. She could make out the contours of a child, a face she recognized, twisted and writhing in anguish. Her heart ached for them, fueling her resolve, but then the chorus of anguished screams swelled, drowning out her thoughts. "Join us!" they cried, voices mingling into a ghastly symphony. The temporary flash of light was gone, and she felt the shadows wrap around her again, heavy and suffocating. She gripped the edges of her sanity, desperate to maintain her mind as tendrils of dark whispered truths only the damned should know. What were these entities? Were they the souls of those they had consumed, trapped forever in these walls? Had she unwittingly walked into a nightmare? "Stop!" Elizabeth screamed, hands raised as if to ward off the encroaching nefariousness. "Let us go! Please!" For a fleeting moment, the laughter ceased, and a figure emerged from the swirling mass, a figure that resembled Brady. Her heart raced, hope battling despair. Yet the smile it wore was grotesque, lips twisted in mockery. "Mom, come home!" The figure stretched out its hand, beckoning through the air thick with despair. Elizabeth hesitated. That wasn't her child. This was a trap, a trick of her failing mind. Ignoring the call, she turned and ran, the ground rumbling beneath her feet. Her chest heaved as the cacophony rose again, entities surging forth, their whispers filling her mind, clouding her thoughts. Every step felt like wading through molasses, the darkness clawing at her ankles, pulling her back. "Help me! Please!" she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. But the darkness laughed, emboldened by her fear. As Elizabeth reached the edge of the pool, she felt bile rise in her throat. She could glimpse movement beneath the inky surface, countless eyes watching, biding their time. "Mom!" The cry was so soft, so full of sorrow, it cut through the noise. A flicker of hope surged again. It had to be Brady. But as she strained to hear, the darkness swallowed it whole, as if the very shadows were absorbing the echoes of her hope. "Your time is running out," a voice crooned, rich with malice. Elizabeth gazed into the darkness, panic erupting in her chest. She couldn't back down now, she had to fight for Brady, fight for freedom. As she turned to face the void, the glowing eyes flared once more, and the ground shook violently. Elizabeth braced herself, ready to confront whatever nightmare awaited. But just then, another voice pierced the air, reverberating through her bones. "You can't escape, you've already lost." The ambience thickened, heat blaring through her skin, illuminating the glaring truths she didn't want to confront. What had she unleashed? What had she willingly stepped into? Now she stood teetering on the edge of what she knew, peering into the unknown. Was escape possible, or was she doomed to become another soul lost to the dark? And as the entities surged forward, Elizabeth realized with horror that her answer was creeping closer than she had ever intended. The darkness convulsed, the weight of it pressing down around Elizabeth like a suffocating shroud. Her breaths quickened, a frantic rhythm keeping pace with the pounding of her heart. The glowing eyes surged closer, a multitude of malevolent gazes, eager to swallow her whole. Every instinct in her screamed to flee, but where could she go in this dreadful expanse gnawing at her sanity? "Brady!" She choked out again, the name a desperate plea. "Please, answer me." But only the mocking echoes replied, laughter twisting in the shadows, a chorus of lost souls joining in the merriment of her despair. The darkness pulsed with energy, twisting memories into weapons. Elizabeth's mind raced. What were they? What did they want from her? She felt as though the entities were reaching into her past, rifling through her memories like a thief in the night. Choking on her fear, she stumbled back, the edge of the pool sharp beneath her. She looked into the obsidian depths, her heart aching at the sight of shadows that took the shapes of those she had loved and lost. A flicker of a small hand, a youthful face twisted in agony. "No!" she screamed, tearing her gaze away as if she could escape their silent screams. "Get away from me!" But a slithering sound echoed from below, creeping into her ears, whispering sweetly vile promises. "Join us, Elizabeth. We will set you free." Panic surged anew at the suggestion. Free? From what? From them? Was escape something she could hope for, or was it mere bait to drown her deeper? The pulsating darkness surged with laughter, a sinister response to her turmoil. The glowing eyes narrowed, and Elizabeth could feel their gaze like a physical force. The heat of it made her sweat, and her pulse raced. In her mind, she saw flashes of Brady, his laughter, the warmth of his small hand in hers. These memories blurred, stripped of joy and infused with dread, dragging her further into despair. "Stop!" she howled, her voice breaking. "Brady!" But the figure in the void only laughed softly, and as the darkness deepened, the silhouette morphed again, growing grotesque, limbs stretching in unnatural ways, mimicking the movements of a marionette manipulated by sadistic hands. "Mom, why don't you want to play?" A scream bubbled in her throat, but all she could do was run. She rushed away from the pool, away from the hungry faces, clawing shadows, and yet they followed, relentless. They were all around her now, brushing against her, their cold breath sending shivers down her spine. "Leave me alone!" Elizabeth cried as she slammed into a wall. The force knocked the air from her lungs, but she barely noticed. She had to keep moving. She had to find Brady. Suddenly, the whole space quaked again, and a howl filled the air, echoing from every corner. "You'll see. You'll join us soon. We want you." Each phrase hit her like a hammer. Deep down, she knew this was more than fear. It was a warning, a sick promise of what lay ahead. The ground trembled, and she stumbled toward a faint glimmer of light that appeared in the distance, an unexpected beacon in this wretched place. "Brady, hold on!" she shouted, praying the light held more than just darkness. As she drew closer, the laughter morphed into screams, the darkness swirling chaotically around her. Just as she reached the edge of the light, it flickered. Uncertainty clawed at her heart like claws dragging through flesh. Would the light save her or lead her to an even deeper hell? The moment hung heavy, thick and charged, and then it sputtered out. The weight of despair rushed in, and the enemies of the dark surged. As the eyes flared in triumph, Elizabeth found herself dragged along, caught in the tide of chaos she couldn't escape. "Let me go!" she wailed, but the voice only laughed, echoing a sick melody of twisted dreams and nightmares. The shadows closed around her, and she felt herself slipping, the last remnants of her will consumed by the void. But before her senses faded entirely, she felt a pulse warm and familiar like the very essence of Brady brushing against her soul. And she understood. This isn't over. What had she unleashed? What darkness now roamed free, weaving between realities, hungry for more? The darkness swallowed her whole, dragging Elizabeth deeper into its malevolent embrace. She could no longer tell if she was moving towards something or simply spiraling into an endless nightmare. The voices swirled around her, a dissonant chorus echoing her fears, calling her name, taunting her. "Brady," she whispered, clinging to the last shred of hope. The memory of his smile flickered in her mind like a dying ember. She staggered but pushed on, propelled by desperation. The shadows writhed, shifting and pulsating, as if they had a life of their own, playing with her anguish. Suddenly, she stumbled upon something solid. The ground was uneven beneath her, and as she looked around, she found she had entered a chamber. The air was thick with a damp, putrid odor, mingling with something metallic. She could barely see, but the flickering remnants of the light seemed to cling to the edges, revealing walls covered in obscured designs and symbols that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. "What is this place?" she murmured, her voice reduced to a scared whisper. The shadows pressed closer, and the gleaming eyes hovered in the periphery. An oppressive weight enveloped her and clawed at her throat. Elizabeth's instincts screamed that whatever these entities were, they fed on her fear, intensifying it with each whispered threat. "If you're real," she shouted defiantly into the void, "show yourselves." For a moment, silence fell. The shadows recoiled as if taken aback by her bravery. But then, laughter erupted, a cacophony that vibrated the very foundation beneath her feet. Such spirit! A deep voice echoed, and from the swirling mass of darkness, a figure began to take shape. It moved slowly, deliberately, emerging like a horror from the deepest corners of her imagination. A grotesque parody of a human form, its face twisted, features morphing and contorting into something even more horrific with every blink. "Who are you?" Elizabeth demanded, taking a tentative step back. "We are the echoes of your past," it hissed, its voice a mixture of her own lost dreams and haunting regrets. "We are what you fear the most. Join us, and you will be free." "Free?" She spat, her voice sharp with defiance. "I've lost everyone to you." "Oh dear Elizabeth," it crooned, leaning closer, eyes glowing with that unholy fire. "You misunderstand. Freedom comes with acceptance. Let go of your pain, let us welcome you into eternal night." The reality of its words hung in the air, and she felt a tug at her heart, a whisper of temptation. The darkness danced and lashed around her, promising relief from the torment of her memories, the loss of Brady. It was seductive so much so that she nearly stepped forward. But she could still feel the warmth of him, the faintest echo of his laugh. "No!" she shrieked, clenching her jaw. "I won't let you take me." The entity cackled in delight, and for a brief moment, Elizabeth thought she saw the shapes of those she had lost flickering within the shadows. Their eyes were filled with sorrow, were they begging her or warning her? But in an instant, she pushed it away. With a newfound resolve, she turned to flee, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The sinister laughter turned to screams, walls closing in as she raced through the chamber, seeking an exit. The ground trembled beneath her, and the symbols on the walls began to glow more brightly, pulsing in sync with her frantic heart. "Give in!" they cried. "It's easier this way." Somewhere in the chaos, Elizabeth spotted something faintly illuminated, a door, barely ajar. She sprinted toward it, but the shadows wrapped around her ankles, dragging her downward, a relentless force threatening to consume her. Just as she reached for the handle, the darkness surged, and she felt a cold grip around her wrist. Panic surged, she could hear a voice, Brady's voice, crying out for her, distorted by the shadows around her. "Mom! Brady!" She screamed, but the door creaked ominously, an invitation but also a warning. With one final desperate pull, she wrenched herself free and lunged into the small space beyond. The darkness slammed against the door behind her, and Elizabeth gasped as she landed hard on the ground. She knew one thing: whatever horrors awaited her on the other side, they had only just begun. But as the door thudded shut, a chilling realization washed over her. She was alone for now. And yet, the shadows were not far behind. Would they come for her again? Would they find a way in? The ground beneath her quaked, and she could almost hear them whispering, singing a requiem of her fate. She had no idea just how much worse it was about to get. Elizabeth lay sprawled on the cold, hard floor, gasping for breath. Dread settled over her like a thick fog, suffocating and unyielding. The chamber was dim, illuminated only by flickering lights that fought against the encroaching darkness, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to curl and wriggle, as if alive. The air felt charged, almost electric, yet she sensed an undercurrent of malice. She pushed herself up, her hands trembling as they touched the chill of the floor. She spun around, scanning her surroundings. The door she had come through appeared intact, but the oppressive darkness pressed against it, eager to invade her sanctuary. What had she stumbled into? This place felt like a nightmare made real. The symbols on the walls pulsed rhythmically, and some reverberated deep within her, awakening unsettling memories, faces of those lost, moments of overwhelming despair. "Get a grip, Elizabeth," she muttered, trying to steady her racing heart. She needed to think, needed to find a way out. But where? Suddenly, a low growl echoed in the chamber, sending icy shivers down her spine. The sound came from the far corner, the shadows there shifting, twisting, drawing closer. Elizabeth held her breath, barely daring to move. It felt like bait, like the shadows were waiting for her to make the wrong decision. "Please just leave me alone," she cried out, more to herself than to any entity lurking in the dark. And yet, the growl morphed into a guttural laugh that sent terror lacing through her veins. The very sound felt like a knife, penetrating her resolve. Pushing against the wall, Elizabeth stumbled on a patch of cold, damp ground. She glanced down and recoiled. Her fingers brushed against something muddy, glimpse of flesh, lifeless. Her stomach churned. Fear gripped her throat. A corpse? No, she couldn't think about that. Brady, she whispered, closing her eyes, forcing his face into her mind. She needed the strength. She needed to remember him and fight back. The sinister laughter rose, filling her ears, resonating against her skull. Join us, sweet child, it taunted. The darkness craves your presence. No! She screamed, her voice cracking. Outrage ignited within her, she wouldn't let them win. Never! Rising with all the strength she could muster, Elizabeth wiped her tears and straightened her back, glancing desperately around for an escape. A small window loomed ahead, frosted glass trapping distant, hostile lights. She rushed towards it, but shadowy tendrils erupted from the corners, snaking out and wrapping around her wrists. They pulled her back, a vice of despair. She kicked and thrashed, heart pounding, fighting against the pull. Let go of me! The shadows hissed, their voices intertwining, growing louder. You cannot escape what is yours, Elizabeth. You belong to us. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she fought against the darkness, fear bubbling up, threatening to overwhelm her. With every ounce of strength, she screamed, "No! I refuse!" In a moment of clarity, she remembered the symbols. They pulsed, shimmering with an energy that beckoned, a potential source of power. If they fed on her fear, maybe they could be turned against them. I will not be consumed! She screamed, reaching toward the symbols. The shadows recoiled, hissing angrily as she began to chant the ancient words she could barely remember, words that stirred in her mind like long-buried secrets. The air crackled as she called forth their power. But just as it felt like she could break free, a massive weight crashed behind her. The door shuddered violently, and a split second later, it burst open. Light flooded the chamber, blending with the shadows in an explosion of chaos. Elizabeth's heart raced, and the laughter grew furious, drowning out her resolve. She turned, eyes wide with dread as she saw outlines of moving shadows spill into the light. Each shape more grotesque than the last, twisting and contorting impossibly, advancing toward her. There was no turning back now. What awaited her in the chaos? Would she finally confront the truth of her past, and who would she lose next? Elizabeth's heart threatened to pound right out of her chest as shadows twisted and writhed, lunging toward her with sharp, claw-like limbs. The light from the door flickered, casting baleful shadows that danced unnaturally on the walls. Desperate, she sank to the floor, shivering in the chill as the meaning of the symbols surged back to her mind with a pulse of urgency. Focus, she whispered to herself, shaking off the panic. She had paused long enough to summon something from within. Ignoring the creeping dread, she pushed against the ground and scrambled toward the wall. The symbols pulsed a shade brighter, and their hum grew louder against the growls and screeches that echoed around her. Stay back! She shouted, hands raised, fearing they would close in. Elizabeth was determined to confront the shadows, to wrestle back the power they so viciously choked her with. The ancient words began to flow, hesitant but powerful. They meant something. She could feel the history of the language surging into her veins. Requiem cordis. Lucem in tenebris. The air shimmered, new energy flaring from the symbols. The shadows recoiled but soon transformed, taking on faces she'd known. Brady? She blinked through unshed tears. Is that you? The maddening laughter intensified, dinning in her ears, shaking her with feverish echoes of pain. He belongs to us now. Release him! Elizabeth screamed again, rage bubbling over within her. Let him go! Your heart is tainted, Elizabeth. Her own name sounded like a curse as they hissed, the tendrils still clutching her. You're just like us. Biting back the fear gnawing at her gut, she pushed forward. Shadows stretched, twisting in impossible ways, materializing and vanishing among the dim light and flickers. Each curve and undulation was a mockery of life, a false illusion of what she once held dear. Memory swarmed in her mind, resurrected images of friends, lost and consumed, haunting her like phantoms. But there, in the corner of the room, a faint glimmer caught her eye. One of the symbols emanated a silvery light. The tendrils hesitated, swaying as if sensing something powerful. Elizabeth dove for the symbol, heart hammering in rhythm to the chant that spilled from her lips, feeding the glow with her desperation. Illumina tenebras. The shadow screamed, a piercing wail that sank into her bones. Blue light exploded from the symbol, striking the darkness with fervor, illuminating everything in its wake. In that breath, she saw them, faces submerged in darkness, pleading, lost. Each word she spoke unraveled the bindings of those twisted souls, and before her, a few figures stepped out of the shadows, eyes wild with unfulfilled longing. Brady? She gasped. But he wasn't there. Instead, the remnants of the past clung to the light. Each former friend and soul once lost emerged from the abyss, still tainted by the darkness, now struggling between realms. Is this what you want? Their voices merged in wails, a chorus bound together by agony, yearning for peace and liberation. Suddenly, the chamber trembled, and the brilliance of the symbol began to falter. The laughter, a chaotic cacophony, grew more intense, vying against the hope that flickered like a candle at the edge of a storm. The symbols began to dim. Shadows lunged again, more frantically this time, seeking to snuff out the light of salvation. Elizabeth felt her heart drop. The veil between life and death was thinning. Stay back. I won't let you take them. She shouted, summoning every ounce of courage. But as the shadows advanced, she realized there was more at stake than she thought. With each moment, fragments of her own soul stirred in response to the call of the darkness. Elizabeth, you belong with us, they whispered, seductive and ominous. And with every flickering pulse of her own heartbeat, the darkness beckoned her to join. What remained inside her trembled, caught between the forces of light and shadow. Would she succumb to the embrace of the past, a choice that could change everything? And just as despair threatened to pull her in, a familiar voice came through the chaos, a whisper of hope that flickered like the dying light of her soul. The truth awaits. What truth? Would she dare to follow it, knowing what lurked in the shadows? The air thickened around Elizabeth, pressing against her lungs. She tried to breathe, but the panic fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. The shadows writhed closer, their desperate tendrils clawing at her resolve. The once comforting symbols now felt like a shackle, tying her to a fate she feared more than death. What truth? She challenged, her voice wavering as dread gripped her. As if hearing her desperation, the shadows transformed again. They shifted, pooling into the shapes of her loved ones, their faces twisted by pain and rage, begging her for release. Join us, they whispered in unison, a chilling harmony that clawed at her sanity. Elizabeth shook her head, fighting the urge to reach out. No. I won't. She felt a pull inside, not just from the shadows, but a deeper hunger for what she had lost. Every moment spent with her loved ones rolled through her mind, a haunting montage of laughter, warmth, and finally, sorrow. Where were they now? The pulse of the light dimmed further, and fear gripped her heart with icy fingers. A sliver of her consciousness teetered dangerously on the edge. She could sense the truth lurking behind those spectral entities, ready to sway her resolve. Elizabeth, another voice broke through. This one was different, a calm, soothing tone that pierced through the chaos. You have to let go. The shadows shrieked as the light flickered and wavered, momentarily waning. Elizabeth hesitated, heart racing. Who are you? She yelled, trying to focus beyond the interference of the shadows. I am the keeper of the truth, it replied, a figure stepping forward from the brightening symbol, a woman wrapped in a shimmering white gown, glowing with an ethereal light. To see the truth, you must first confront the darkness within you. You're lying. Elizabeth retaliated, pulling herself back against the wall. The tendrils curved in response, tasting her fear, crowding closer like a pack of wolves. You're all lying. No. The figure extended a hand, radiating warmth and safety, drawing her in. Face your past. Your choices shape the light. It is not the shadows that bind you, it is the silence in your heart. Elizabeth's head spun, the shadows laughing, echoing her doubt. She thought of Brady, of his smile lingering in her thoughts. She longed to see him again, but what price would she pay? Would clinging to those fading memories rip her apart? Face your truth, Elizabeth, the glowing woman urged again, unwavering. Set your heart free. Banish them, or let them consume you. The laughter of the shadows rose in a twisted crescendo, roaring around her, clawing at her with memories, seduction. You will never be free. We are your past. We claim you. They screeched. With trembling resolve, she pushed against the fear, her voice rising against the din. I refuse to be chained by your lies. I am not like you. The moment hung suspended, a breath before the plunge. Suddenly, a surge of energy formed around her, igniting the symbols, unleashing a blinding flash that lit the labyrinthine chamber. But in that light, something shifted. Elizabeth felt a ripple within the fabric of her reality. The shadows shrieked as the light expanded, but not without a final clamor of wrath. Elizabeth felt herself pulled in every direction between light and dark, what she held on to and what she must let go. And then everything cracked open. Elizabeth! The cry rang, raw and desperate, echoing through worlds she never knew existed. But who had called her name? In that moment, Elizabeth grasped for clarity as she teetered on the brink. Would she plunge into the truth, embracing that which could save or destroy her? The shadows writhed, and she felt the weight of their decision looming over her. What was waiting beyond the threshold? Or worse, who would she find? The crack of reality echoed through her bones, a sound that felt both familiar and foreign. Elizabeth was yanked in every direction, a tether to her past yanking violently against a pull toward an unseen future. Her heart pounded like thunder, each beat reverberating through the chaos that enveloped her. Elizabeth! The voice came again, desperate, clawing through the shadows. It was a call she recognized and one that set her nerves ablaze. But as she grasped for the source, the shadows tightened around her, wrapping her in their suffocating embrace. She gasped for breath. Help me! Let go! The shining figure implored, her luminous presence creating ripples of light. Elizabeth felt that warmth again, a flicker of hope in the cold, oppressive darkness. But what if before she could finish, the shadows recoiled, their laughter shifting into howls of rage? We are with you, Elizabeth. Always. You cannot escape us. The walls of the chamber began to quiver, shifting and contorting. Symbols painted on the walls once her sanctuary transformed into grotesque images of her past. Family gatherings twisted into mournful gatherings, and laughter turned into cries of despair. Faces floated in the shadows, friends, family, each one splintered, a version of themselves she never wanted to face. Release them! The glowing figure commanded, strength radiating from her very essence. It is the only way. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. To release them meant to break the bonds she clung to so fiercely. But the urge to reach out for their love, their companionship, was intoxicating. I can't. They need me. They need you to be free. The light urged, fingers still outstretched. They are gone, trapped in the pain of their last moments. Choose, Elizabeth, or forever remain shackled by your guilt. A surge of regret washed over her. Memories played like a deranged slideshow, the last moments she spent with each one, laced with unsaid words, stifling silence. Suddenly, as if conjured by her thoughts, she could see Brady's radiant smile. It flickered like a dying ember. The shadows stirred, unnervingly close. Join us. There's no need to resist. You belong with us, Elizabeth. You cannot deny the truth that binds us. No! She screamed, feeling the weight of their insistence. I won't give in. As if propelled by her resolve, the light surged, and for a moment, the shadows recoiled. Elizabeth felt a sudden rush of clarity, a fragment of a memory. A late-night conversation with Brady flashed before her. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to find peace. Let go, let go. The words turned into a mantra in her mind, pushing back against the enveloping dark. With a fierce cry, she felt herself breaking free. She unleashed a wave of energy, light pulsing from her core, suffusing the shadows, intertwining with their darkness. Go! She bellowed, every ounce of power surging through her. The shadows shrieked, contorting, fighting against the radiant energy. Faces warped in agony, distilling into wails of sorrow. Just as light and darkness threatened to collide, Elizabeth stepped forward, her heart pounding hard against her ribs. "I release you." The room erupted in chaos. Shadows shrieked, swirling into a vortex, tearing away like paper in the wind. As they dissipated, Elizabeth felt an almost unbearable release, but the pain of separation settled like lead, a deep void of silence engulfing her. Yet in the aftermath, something shifted again. The walls pulsed with energy, glowing symbols flashing like a heartbeat. A door emerged in front of her, shimmering and vibrating with a new energy. What lay beyond it? Another chance? Or an unspeakable horror waiting to be unleashed? With one last glance at the remnants of her past, Elizabeth stepped through, heart hammering, uncertain and terrified. What awaited her on the other side? Elizabeth stepped through the shimmering doorway, heart pounding against her chest like a wild animal desperate for freedom. The air shifted around her, warm and inviting, contrasting sharply with the oppressive chill of the darkness she had just escaped. The noise, the screams and laughter of her past faded into an echo, a haunting whisper that felt both distant and close. She stumbled forward, vision adjusting to the new light that enveloped her. This place felt different. It had a softness in the air and the gentle sound of water flowing somewhere nearby, almost soothing, like a lullaby after a long, chaotic night. "Brady!" She called out, the name slipping from her lips like a prayer. She felt lighter here, the heaviness in her chest easing ever so slightly. The vibrant colors around her seemed to breathe a sense of calm, as if welcoming her back from the abyss she had just escaped. Then her heart raced again. Could this be real? Was the threat truly over, or had she merely stepped into another nightmare disguised as an awakening? Doubt washed over her, but an urge to move forward, to search for her son, filled her resolute spirit. "Mom!" Her world shifted, the voice was unmistakable. She rushed toward the sound, guided by that familiar warmth she felt wrapped around her heart. Elizabeth sprinted down a corridor lined with luminous vines that seemed to pulse with life. "Brady!" And there he was, standing at the end of a light-filled chamber, glowing with an ethereal brightness that took her breath away. His small figure illuminated the shadows cowering in the corners, a stark contrast of innocence against everything she had just survived. "Mom!" His blue eyes shone with the light of 1,000 stars, making the ache in her heart burgeon into a fierce longing. She ran to him, arms wide open, and he leaped into her embrace, warm and real, filling her with love and relief. "I thought I lost you." Her voice trembled as she held him tight, feeling the pulse of life against her heart. "You didn't," he whispered, almost shyly, his voice full of wonder. "I've been waiting for you." Elizabeth pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his face, not wanting to miss a single detail. But in the softening of his gaze, she found a strength and assurance that shone back at her. "What happened?" she asked, taking a deep breath to steady the tremor in her voice. "Everything is okay now." Brady smiled up at her, an innocent glow radiating from him. The darkness, they had overcome it together. Suddenly, the air shifted again, as if the boundaries of this new place were responding to their reunion. Elizabeth felt an unshakable urge to forgive herself. She had fought against the shadows for Brady, and in doing so, she had discovered something crucial, her own strength. The entities, the darkness, they were gone. She had reclaimed that part of her spirit that yearned for hope, and now, it sparkled brightly with promise. As she looked around, Elizabeth noticed the chamber transforming, walls rippling like a fantasy. Shapes began to emerge from the light, figures she recognized, people she had loved and lost. Faces from her past, freed from the torment of the darkness they had once inhabited. They smiled gently, waving with love, their eyes filled with understanding. With every familiar face, she felt her heart swell. Her mom, Aunt Clara, friends from her old life, all of them radiated with warmth and acceptance, filling Elizabeth with an overwhelming sense of peace. "I'm sorry," Brady whispered, his voice like a feather brushing against her ear. "Sorry? For what?" Elizabeth asked, confused. "I didn't want to leave you," he said, genuine sorrow in his eyes but lightness in his heart. "But you had to face it alone." A tear slipped down Elizabeth's cheek, the weight of the goodbye crashing down on her, but it felt different now. "I'm proud of you," he added softly, his tiny hand squeezing hers. "You were so brave, Mom." And like sunshine breaking through clouds, warmth engulfed her. She had faced the darkness, the shadows of regret, and emerged not just as a survivor, but as a mother ready to embrace the future. Together, hand in hand, they began to walk toward the light that awaited them, rekindling within her the spark of hope and love. The past would always hold echoes, but here, in this place, they had all they needed: each other. As they stepped into the bright shimmer, Elizabeth felt a sense of closure wrapping around her. The darkness was a distant memory now, one she had conquered. Now that you've experienced this intense conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, it seriously makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this mind-blowing ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this conclusion. They will not want to miss out.